Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We'll begin with our hymn of welcome 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Let's sing together. There is a river flowing in my soul. There is a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There is a river flowing in my soul. There is a river flowing in my heart. There is a river flowing in my heart. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There is a river flowing in my heart. There is a river flowing in my mind. There is a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There is a river flowing in my heart. There is a river. There is a river. There is a river in my soul.
Good morning. My name is Alex Mackay. I've been a member of UU Danbury since 1985. Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. We're so glad that each of you are able to join us this morning, and together In community, we can ensure that social distancing does not mean social disengagement. Our weekly services are more than just a gathering of our physical bodies. It is the forming of a sacred time that we make together. Whether you're well-versed in the technology of teleconferencing, or this is your first venture, we welcome you. Whatever your faith and traditions of your past, whatever your theological stance, whatever your heritage, whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. You can learn more about us on the webpage, on our Facebook page and website. We encourage you to share our Facebook page and reach out to others who may be isolated at this time and might benefit from the spiritual connection that is typically available by walking through our open doors on Clapboard Ridge Road on Sunday mornings. The events of this week have shone a ruthless light on the continuing struggle for fair treatment of all people in our communities. We've seen good behavior and bad. Some organizations, certain corporations and the NFL, for example, have experienced a sudden revelation. Many in our congregation have spoken out and taken part in protests. Voices like theirs must be heard and must spur meaningful change. The issues are far from being resolved. More has to happen with more people engaged. The election in November is crucial. Everybody should be encouraged and enabled to vote for what they feel is right. UU Danbury continues to be a beacon for our values, including justice, equity, and compassion. Again, welcome to the UU Congregation of Danbury, where we welcome all in a spirit of compassion, inquiry, and service. Please stay after the service for the annual meeting. In the year to come, please, all of you, do whatever you can to keep that beacon of UU Danbury shining. Don't forget that you have to disconnect from this Zoom meeting and reconnect for the separate annual meeting Zoom. And each voting member needs to connect on a separate device in order to vote. Please heed the online guidelines that we have had for all our virtual services. These are being shown now. There will be no religious education this week. So let me pass over then to Reverend Heather.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Alex, for all your words and energy this morning. It is good to be with you all today, as every week, but somehow especially the one we're in always seems the most crucial. When I pause and think about the world, our country, this week, last week, I have felt so heavy-hearted. And so as I prepared for this morning's service, I was especially aware of how necessary it is to create something both true and beautiful, both honest and hopeful. I feel like it is especially in Unitarian Universalist services that we seek to strike this balance. Join me in this endeavor today. May we together create a sacred time that is both true and beautiful, both honest and hopeful. Come, let us open our hearts on this journey together. In a little bit, we will join together in a ritual, and for that, I invite you to have a bowl or cup of water nearby and some salt. Then following that time, we'll have our usual milestones, and I will share about Bruce Busby's death at that point and invite you to share personal milestones at that point. So please try to help me in holding those as two separate times in our service today. For right now, let us each hold our chalice up so that others can see it for a moment, and then take a minute to light your chalice. And then, after a deep breath, let us say our chalice lighting words together. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. Could all the children, kids, and youth, as you are willing and able, come forward now so that we can see you on our screens. Ethan McCoy will lead us in the children's affirmation today. Please, everyone, bring your UUs up into the air.
You just need to do it.
Let's all put our U's high in the sky. We are Unitarian, Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands.
Thank you, Ethan. In a collaboration between CNN and Sesame Street yesterday, a town hall was aired addressing questions from children across the country about racism and the protests of these past weeks. I encourage you, all of you with children in your lives, to look up these CNN Sesame Street town halls. They did one some weeks ago on the coronavirus, and then they did one yesterday on racism. And it's just beautiful to really center the voices and questions of children while bringing in adult experts to help sort through these topics and how to talk about these things. So I commend that to you. Near the end, CNN commentator Van Jones answered one child's question about everything that's going on by saying simply, "Revolution is about a change of heart. Who do you open your heart to? Who do you love on?" It is with that question in my heart that I choose to share this book with you this morning and its gorgeous illustrations. This is Love by Matt De La Peña and Lauren Long. In the beginning, there is light, and two wide-eyed figures standing near the foot of your bed, and the sound of their voices is love. A cab driver plays love softly on his radio while you bounce in back with the bumps of the city, and everything smells new, and it smells like life. Love, too, is the smell of crashing waves and a train whistling blindly in the distance, and each night the sky above your trailer turns the color of love. In a crowded concrete park, you toddle towards summer sprinklers while older kids skip rope and run up the slide, and soon you are running among them, and the echo of your laughter is love. On the night the fire alarm blares, you're pulled from sleep and whisked into the street where a quiet old lady is pointing to the sky. Stars shine long after they've flamed out, she tells you, and the shine they shine with is love. And I love in this picture how there's a fire going on in the apartment building, and firefighters have been called and they've had to get out of their apartment buildings, and she is focusing her kid or her neighbor kid or her neighbor grandkid on the stars in the sky. But it's not only stars that flame out, you discover. It's summers too, and friendships, and people. One day you find your family nervously huddled around the TV, but when you ask what happened, they answer with silence and shift between you and the screen. In your dream that night, you are searching for a love that seems lost. You open and close drawers, lift cushions, empty old toy bins, but there's nothing. You wake with a start in the arms of a loved one who bends to your ear and whispers, "It's okay. It's okay. It's love." And in time, you learn to recognize a love you'd overlooked, a love that wakes at dawn and rides to work on the bus, a slice of burned toast that tastes like love. And it's love in each deep crease of your grandfather's face as he lowers himself onto an overturned bucket to fish. And it's love in the rustling leaves of gnarled trees lined behind the flower fields. And it's love in the made-up stories your uncles tell in the backyard between wild horseshoe throws. And the man in rags outside the subway station plays love notes that lift into the sky like tiny beacons of light. And the face staring back in the bathroom mirror, this too is love. So when the time comes for you to set off on your own, heavy winds will sweep past your building and the great gray clouds will congregate above. Your loved ones will stand there like puddles beneath their umbrellas, holding you tight and kissing you and wishing you luck. But it won't be luck you'll leave with, because you'll have love. You'll have love, love, love. Let us sing with our children and for the child in all of us about our little light. Let it shine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Whew, there is a lot to hold this morning, so pardon me for occasionally just naming that, trying to keep track of all the things, or as many as I can hold. I wanted to say one other thing about that book, which the title and author in your order of service in the email from Sherry with the link for this service. It's called, again, Love by Matt De La Peña and Lauren Long. And I wanted to say one other thing about it, which is that may it not be solely hopes for good luck that we send our children and youth and one another out into this country with, but instead an active, determined, committed love, which is the segue for me for this ritual. So I invite you now to have a bowl or cup of water nearby and some salt. I share with you this ritual passed on to me by Reverend Erica Hewitt, who was herself inspired by Reverend Carol Sissel, who used these elements in a ritual she wrote for the UUA's Promise and the Practice work. This has been a week of outrage and lamentation. The deep generational trauma of white supremacy in our country made itself known yet again when George Floyd died under a Minneapolis police officer's knee. This was a 21st century lynching. It wasn't an isolated act of white violence. It's what's been happening to Black and brown people, and especially Black men, for centuries, for millennia. Please take a breath with me. I will invite you in a few moments to use the chat for sacred naming. If you identify as white, our grief must also be a reckoning. I will invite you to write in the chat the name of one of the many Black people who have been killed through white violence. This violence is at the heart of our country's origin story. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz points out the founding of a state based on the ideology of white supremacy, the widespread practice of African slavery, and a policy of genocide and land theft. We will not ignore George Floyd's death or its terrible context. We have metastatic racism, says Ibram X. Kendi, and it is literally killing America. And so along with my chalice, I have a bowl of water and some salt. If you have some too, I invite you to use your hand to stir salt into the water, to submerge your fingers into it as we have promised to put ourselves into the holy work of anti-racism. I even invite you to taste the salty water as a reminder of the grief and trauma inflicted on Black and brown bodies in this country, and the legacy of that pain that is ours to help both dismantle and heal. As names appear in the chat, and with your microphone muted as it will be, please say these names out loud in your home. Say these names with grief, and if you're white, with responsibility. Write those names on the signs that you bring to the anti-racism vigils and rallies happening all around us and online. If you see names that are new to you, look them up on Wikipedia. Even just today in the Hartford Courant, and I've posted it on line on my Facebook page, there is an article on the front of the Sunday in Connecticut section, Deadly Encounters. Police have killed 21 people in Connecticut in the past 5 years, and it names, and I'm sure this is probably not the whole story, right? But it names 21 individuals and the circumstances involving their death from police brutality. So I invite you to look that up as well. By learning, knowing, and saying these names, you become a part of keeping the humanity of these people at the forefront of all our minds and hearts. Our tears are not enough. Our anger isn't even enough. But our lamentation and rage drive us to act, to hold vigil, to make phone calls, to offer financial support, to interrupt harmful conversations, and to initiate uncomfortable conversations with those who would rather look away. May these tears be a beginning. May we keep going. Please continue using the chat now while we listen to Glenn Thomas Rideout sing Wo Ya Ya for us, which means we keep going. Wo Ya Ya. May this ritual just be one of the ways we further expand our hearts and engage more fully with the call to listen, to respond, and to act.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we are going.
May you continue learning and knowing and researching and lifting up and shouting the names that we have listed here together. So now we're going to shift to our personal milestones, the news of your life beyond the national events of this past week that is either weighing down or lifting up your heart this morning. And I do want to start by acknowledging the death of UUCD member Bruce Busby. He died Friday morning, most likely due to complications from COVID. Bruce is survived by his wife, Jerry, who welcomes your telephone calls. Written condolences can be sent to the Busby's daughters, Erica and Janice. He was 90 years old. He had just turned 90 in January, and they had been able to celebrate his birthday then. There will be an in-person memorial service at some later date. I know we all hold Bruce and his family in our hearts and thoughts, and I will light a candle here in his memory. Please join me in our time of sharing milestones in the chat as Jerry plays for us.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Now is the time for our offering. It seems a crazy time to be thinking about money. I know it's the last thing that I'm thinking about this morning. I'm having a hard time actually holding all of this in and what's going on in the world, so you'll pardon me. But it is a necessary part of life and of what we need, and so there are several ways you can give your offering this morning. You can send it in to Cupboard Ridge, or you can use the Simple app. Also, I invite you to think about food insecurity and the people who don't have food, and you can give through arcforpeace.org. And now if you'd all join me in dedicating our offerings this morning. In the spirit of compassion and service, we dedicate these, our offerings. Today we have a very special presentation for our offertory from Sweet Honey in the Rock, Ella's song.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, how can you rest? We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, how can you rest? We who believe in freedom cannot rest. The older I get, the better I know that the secret to my going on is when the razor in the hand of the young dead to run against the storm. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing for the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. But now we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Don't you rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. You know that struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. I'm survived to no man's word. You know that we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, don't you rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. One more time now. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. I believe. Do you believe? Do you believe in freedom? Yes.
This is a reflection in two parts. The first part is an excerpt from an open letter by Reverend Ashley Horan, who lives and works in Minneapolis. George Floyd was murdered by police on Monday, May 25th. The uprising that is happening right now is not just about George Floyd. It is about George Floyd and Tamar Clark and Philando Castile, about Ahmaud Arbery and Tina Pop and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade, about Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and Oscar Grant and Rekia Boyd and Michael Brown. And it is also about decades and generations and centuries of everything that led us here, about the destruction of Black Wall Street and Tuskegee and the Fugitive Slave Act and Bloody Sunday and the bombing of the Move House in Philadelphia and the transatlantic slave trade and how COVID-19 is exponentially more deadly to Black people than it is to any other group. And if you weren't familiar with any of these events, I invite you, as I needed to do, to look them up on Wikipedia, our marvelous online encyclopedia. Black Wall Street, Tuskegee, the Fugitive Slave Act, Bloody Sunday, the bombing of the Move House, and so on. As I watch Minneapolis's 3rd police precinct burn, Reverend Ashley continues, and watch some of the people in my social networks comment with shock and horror, asking, how could this have happened? All I can think to myself is, how could this not have happened? I will not engage in a conversation here about looting and rioting and who does and doesn't approve of these tactics, Ashley continues. To do so is a trap, a distraction, a faithless and cowardly ruse to get us to look away from confronting the absolute brokenness and devastation white supremacy and capitalism have sown throughout our history and our present. Instead, I want to speak directly to this moment as a Unitarian Universalist, as an organizer of faith communities, and as a white person. To my Black family and siblings and comrades, you don't need my words, but I will still say aloud that I am praying for you today, for your babies and your grandparents and your beloved dead, recent and long gone. I am casting spells of protection and love around you. I am trying to listen to your stories, your asks, your visions, your rage, and meet them all with an open heart and a willingness to act and a creative mind to move every resource and skill I can muster. And I was thinking about those words when Deb was talking about money, because there is something about money that is relevant right now, a lot of things. And so I hope we can all keep thinking about that as well, as we move towards building a world that is more whole and free. I see you. I love you. And soon, very soon, I am praying that you have access to spaces that foster your healing and joy and connection and repair. To my Indigenous siblings and non-Black beloveds of color, Ashley continues, I know these are complex moments in which identity is both weaponized and invisibilized. I deeply trust that you are doing both what you need to do to tend to your tender hearts and to show up in solidarity with our Black kindred. I see you. I love you. I am praying that you also have access to spaces that foster your healing and joy and connection and repair. I'm praying for you too. To my white family and siblings and comrades, specifically my white Unitarian Universalist siblings in faith, what is happening tonight is not about other people, other communities, other institutions. Framing it that way will only make us armchair quarterbacks as we turn away from the things we are responsible for doing in our own families and neighborhoods and nation. I want to speak specifically to what we can do as people who are part of religious communities and congregations. Here it is. Let's get serious together, starting now. Let's not spend another minute fretting about upsetting people by using the words white supremacy. Let's have genuine conversations about making reparations with our endowments and committing to not calling the police. Let's develop the skills and the comfort with conflict to recognize bad behavior that springs from white supremacy culture among us, to circle around it and cut it off and shut it down without delay. Let's get real about the resources, human, infrastructural, financial, that we have access to as individuals and as faith communities, and get to the work of redistributing them. Let's move some serious money to Black liberation organizing. Let's not spend another minute practicing a wishy-washy universalism that means all beliefs and behaviors are acceptable, or pretending that the call to dismantle white supremacy culture within our faith is somehow a tyrannical plot to curb freedom of conscience and belief. And let's create spaces that foster our own healing and joy and connection and repair. I'm praying for us too. The words of Reverend Ashley Horan in Minneapolis, who is very much involved in the UU the Vote campaign. That's part of her work. So I invite you to look her up on Facebook or other means in order to get more connected if you aren't already. My part 2 today is titled, For the Sake of Whom. When Reverend Kathy and I were installed as the newly settled co-ministers at the Unitarian Society of Hartford in 2014, a colleague and mentor of ours, Reverend Larry Piers, gave us the charge to the ministers. He asked us to keep always in our minds 3 questions. For the sake of whom? For the sake of what? And for the sake of when? I have been holding these past few weeks the first question especially. For the sake of whom? For the sake of whom do we act? For the sake of whom do we try new things? Do we allow ourselves to be stretched outside of our more comfortable, familiar zones? For the sake of whom will we take new risks and try our hand at creating something magnificent, something that might provide solace for those who desperately need it, something that we cannot yet fully imagine or see clearly ourselves? For the sake of whom am I worrying about this or that? For the sake of whom am I nervous about what we might do and stand for as a congregation? I have been raised, perhaps like many of you, not to anger others, to be polite and socially appropriate, to not upset or offend, and as a woman to use anger very, very carefully and discreetly, perhaps only indirectly or as a last resort. I was biking to the Unitarian Society of Hartford meeting house one morning, thinking about why I was anxious about some of the language and approach of the Moral Monday Connecticut organizers, a Black-led organization in the Hartford, based in the Hartford area. And I realized it was because I was afraid of making people mad. I was raised to do things that are gentle, positive, kind, thoughtful, things that bring people together, that ease tension. My grandmother said to my boss once in Philadelphia, Heather likes to make people feel safe. And I think about that sometimes. She meant it positively, right? But unfortunately, little in our society is dramatically changed just by putting out there, how about we all be a little bit nicer to each other? There's a bumper sticker for this, I know. Well-behaved women rarely make history. I realized on that bike ride that day to the meeting house that the entire focus of my attention and concern up until that moment had been the possible hypothetical reactions of people who are living relatively comfortable lives. What about the reactions of people who need something to happen, who need there to be some dramatic changes in our society in order that they may live free, as Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, live truly free in their bodies? What about the people who need to be seen for their human selves, need to be freed from the narrow path our country has allotted them thus far? For the sake of whom might I take a risk, a risk of upsetting or offending others. And I also thought about the ways in which I am a part of the problem and experiencing the problem simply in the ways I have been socialized. And how can I break myself free of those limitations as well? Racism impacts all of us, right? Power concedes nothing without a demand, wrote Frederick Douglass in 1857. It never did, and it never will. Ta-Nehisi Coates shares with his son in Between the World and Me a short anecdote, a moment in his life to which I can relate in my own way as a parent. One afternoon, he writes, your mother and I took you to visit a preschool. Our host took us down to a large gym filled with a bubbling ethnic stew of New York children. The children were running, jumping, and tumbling. You took one look at them, tore away from us, and ran right into the scrum. You have never been afraid of people, of rejection, and I have always admired you for this and always been afraid for you because of this. I watched you leap and laugh with these children you barely knew, and the wall rose in me, and I felt I should grab you by the arm, pull you back and say, we don't know these folks. Be cool. I did not do this. I was growing, and if I could not name my anguish precisely, I still knew that there was nothing noble in it. But now I understand the gravity of what I was proposing, that a 4-year-old child be watchful, prudent, and shrewd, that I curtail your happiness. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me won the National Book Award for Nonfiction in 2015. If you haven't read it, or if you haven't read it for some years, I commend it to you and encourage you to pick it up at these times again. For the sake of his son, a young Black man in the United States of America in the 21st century, Coates writes, history is not solely in our hands. And still, you are called to struggle, not because it assures you victory, but because it assures you an honorable and sane life. History is not solely in our hands. And still, you are called to struggle, not because it assures you victory, but because it assures you an honorable and sane life. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, for the sake of whom did you arrive into this Zoom service this morning? Whoever comes up is fine. Perhaps you're here for yourself first and foremost. That's fine. You got yourself here. Now ask yourself again, for the sake of who else? For the sake of you, who do you commit and recommit yourselves to this congregation, this Unitarian Universalist faith, this larger global community of liberal religion and independent interdependence? For whom do you hold out a place, hoping they might join us here one Sunday? And for whom do you extend yourself to other communities? This article, again, from the cover of the Current this morning, that features the voices of many Black leaders throughout the state. I love this part by Archbishop Leroy Bailey Jr. of the First Cathedral in Bloomfield. He says, we have two separate societies that are being experienced on Sunday morning. Even on our telecasts, I've heard preachers say, well, your church ought to be integrated. The issue is they're saying, come to my church. That's what the white pastors say. But he won't tell them to go to the African American church. Well, your culture is different. Yes, our cultures are different, but we have to learn from each other and we have to trust each other. Trust only comes by means of cooperation. And so I was thinking about that and thinking, like, We record our services. You can watch them and then go back and watch the recording, and you may well be able to do that with a Black-led congregation in these times in a way that would be more difficult to do when we're all in person. So I encourage you to look out and visit and experience Black-led congregational life in this unique moment in this country, to listen to the voices of Black leaders wherever you can find them. For whom do you come here to be nourished, that you might go out into this world more grounded, more focused, more giving, more available? For the sake of whom? Our Unitarian Universalist engagement with the world around us can be discordant and conflictual. We can be startled by our own range of experiences, personalities, and opinions. I know I found that in the days after September 11th, when I was a member of the Church of the Larger Fellowship online from Taos, New Mexico, just seeing in the discussions the range of opinion and experience within Unitarian Universalism was stunning to me. Still, we agree to create and be in community with one another. We agree to listen to one another, to hear each other out. We agree to look within and take responsibility for our part. We covenant with one another to seek the truth in love. And we gather in ever-evolving communities that we did not originally create. As you all know well, and especially in these still strange days of meeting online, our places of legacy and worship and gathering will not always look the same or be in the same place. They will not always draw upon the same components, be led by the same people, or sing the same songs. We have to keep up with our moment in order to create something relevant and resilient for the future. Why have we been doing all that we have been so busy doing? That's a question in my mind as we go into our annual meeting. Why do we do all this? Why am I here now? And why are you? For the sake of whom? Notice when you are caught up in fears, anxieties, resentments, and frustrations that you could let go of. I know for me, these past few weeks, one mantra has been, it's not about me. Like when I feel myself getting all up into my own business about, am I not doing enough? Should I be doing something else? Wait, should I have said that? Maybe I should have said something different. I just go, whoa, Heather, it's not about me. Just keep going. Don't get caught up in this own self-analysis and critique that takes all this energy away from what we actually need to be participating in. Let yourself be for someone, for something, some value that you hold above all. Think about who is calling you into action. I've been so inspired these past weeks by both the work of our DRE in Danbury, Sierra Marie Gerfeo, and also the leadership of our DRE in Hartford, Black woman Rayla Matson, who has for the first time in her life started going to protests and gathering people and going to protests and live streaming from those protests. We each have to figure out the way that we feel called, right? And it can feel paralyzing, all the calls for our attention and contributions and petitions and rallies and meetings and so on. I like to think of each action that we take, however minor it may seem, as a tiny beacon of light, like those of the man outside the subway station in the book I read earlier. Love notes that lift into the sky like tiny beacons of light. We know not what impact our actions will have. What's important is to do something, as Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, for our own lives to be honorable and sane, to do something. There are 1,000 lists of suggested actions out there right now. I included the Hartford UU Congregation's blog post with several suggestions in the UUCD this week, this past Thursday. We can run it again this week. Share what you do with one another, what you find moves you and inspires you and makes you feel like, okay, I did a tiny thing, a tiny beacon of light, but it was better than doing nothing. Every action moves our own hearts, opens our own hearts, conveys that we see one another and that we are not content to just sit back and idly hope in a Hallmark sort of way that things someday change. I had originally planned today to speak about going into the summer and creating rituals in the summer. And that has obviously shifted completely, but I'm still thinking about the ritual that is social action, social justice. How can you make that a central ritual in your daily life? Also from the Hartford Courant this morning, Jay Williams, president of Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, writes, "You can't put your shoulder to the wheel and do it for a while until you get tired and then say, okay, I've done my part. Because the inertia of the structural racism and injustice has existed for hundreds of years, for generations. So my question is not what can we do right now, but what can we do every day? What can you incorporate into your life like a ritual, as much as brushing your teeth is a ritual? How can you make it a part of your daily actions? I have discerned these past few weeks that I am determined to be an actor, not a bystander, but that I can spend a lot of time overthinking about what that action should be. Still, I'm determined to give up some of my conveniences, some of my time and ease in life so that we might bring about justice that is so long overdue and that I know my soul needs as well. May you also hear and answer the call. May it be so. Join me in a deep and complete breath of silence, and then we will all sing together with Jerry, Spirit of Life.
Rise in the sea, move in the air, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, to me, come to me.
Let us each extinguish our chalices now and then join in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. I'm going to ask those of you using the chat right now to just take a break from that. We're going to end the service really soon, and I don't want to end it on a point of discussion in the chat. This is one of the challenges of online space. Sometimes it makes really a lot of sense to be using the chat, and other times I think it might be good for us to consider just closing it for a little while so that we might just receive and not immediately engage in reaction and discussion. I've been noticing how important that is right now, to really try to receive and listen and think about what people mean when they say certain phrases and words, rather than getting into a discussion about the downsides of that phrasing. So I'm just going to ask us to pause on the chat and join in our closing hymn, which is When the Spirit Says Do, and we'll sing it 3 times through. First time through will be do, shout, and then laugh. I invite you to get up and move and dance and breathe in the energy of this song, calling upon us all, and then we'll start to transition towards the annual meeting. All right. Thank you all so much. It was so difficult to figure out what to say and what to include in this service. So I appreciate you rolling along and keeping your hearts open and continuing to think about what needs to be said, what needs to be shared, and how can we move ourselves as individuals, as a community, and as a country toward a better way of being with one another. The UUCD annual meeting will begin at 11:30. You are all members and friends and family members and newcomers welcome to join us, and we truly hope that you will. Among other things, we'll be appreciating lay leadership transitions during this annual meeting, and with great gratitude expressing our thanks to all of you who have put so many hours into co-creating and continuing this community from week to week and year to year. Some logistics now. As soon as I stop talking here, please go right ahead and leave this Zoom service room, as strange as that might feel. We're going to just ask that you leave because we can't open up the annual meeting room until everyone has left this room. Find your personal individual link for entering the annual meeting. Member couples sharing a household and a device right now do still need to each log in on a separate device for the annual meeting. Hopefully you have already registered. If you haven't, it's not too late to do that now. Look for the email about registering from Sherry in your inbox. Once you've registered, look for the email you then receive with your personal registered link to the meeting. It is usually sent out the day before and an hour before. It will come from the UU Congregation of Danbury. It may go into your bulk mail or your updates folder in Gmail. That's where I found mine. Once you've got that link, please go ahead and enter the room so that everybody isn't trying to arrive all at precisely the same moment. Don't wait till 11:29, please. Go ahead and enter. We want to see you starting to arrive well before 11:30 so that we know you are in and we can quickly establish a member quorum. Then, with your device still logged into the annual meeting, take your human self to the bathroom or for a stretch break, and we'll see you at the annual meeting at 11:30. That is it, beautiful people. Let's go do the work of co-creating community together. Thank you, all of you, for being here today.